Good morning, Aubrey. What's the weather like out there in Arizona?
It's been really muggy lately, like humid,
Oh.
because we're in our monsoon season. So there'll be more rain than usual, which, yay.
Hmm.
But then it makes it just really uncomfortable. Like you feel like you need a shower all the time because there's so much humidity in the air.
That was a fantastically detailed answer. And guys, that is what you need to try and do on the speaking exam, right? If you listen to Aubrey's natural answer there about like an everyday topic like weather that could come up on IELTS, I want you to hear how she extended it by saying, because this, because this. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I'm uncomfortable because this. It's muggy because this. So, guys, this is what we're talking about today. What if you do not do that on the speaking exam? You are going to hear the examiner kind of get annoyed, honestly, and like ask you why at the end of every part one question if your answers are too short. And they'll even say something like that in part two as well.
Yes, and you have to be ready for that, right? Unfortunately, this might happen that your answer is too short. Recognize the examiner might ask you why or share more because they need more details from you. Don't let it throw you off, but also you can be better prepared so that your answers are longer. You give more information so the examiner doesn't have to ask that.
Exactly. You guys, you don't want the examiner to ask why. Okay. If the examiner asks why, that means your answer is too short. That's the only reason the examiner is going to say that. Okay. So this is what we're talking about today, guys. This is some insider knowledge of the examiner's role and what that means for your score. And really, it's based on two YouTube comments that we got recently. So remember that every one of these podcasts, guys, is on video on IELTS Energy TV on YouTube. And I also want to remind you that we have a free IELTS quiz you can take to get your estimated IELTS band score, which is super awesome. It just takes 5 minutes. The more knowledge, the better, guys. So go to allearsenglish.com/my score to check out that free IELTS quiz. So, okay, let's get into these two YouTube questions. And then, guys, we're going to do a bit of a role play today and show you what it's like on the speaking exam when you make the examiner ask follow-up questions that they don't want to.
Right, exactly. Okay, I'll share the first question. It was from Ranjit Singh Rana on IELTS Energy TV. It said, if I stop speaking without the examiner telling me to, then is there a negative effect? And
What do you think,
unfortunately,
Aubrey?
yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes, definitely. Like you said, you might hear that annoyance in their voice, possibly, and it is decreasing your fluency score because it is flagging that you don't have more to say.
Is that for every part of the speaking test? Like, is this true for part one? If the student just keeps talking, right? If this person keeps talking because they're waiting for the examiner to stop them, is that a good thing?
Oh, gotcha, what you're saying. So my
Right?
thought is if I stop speaking without the examiner telling me, oh, I see. So I'm misunderstanding the
Right?
question. Yes, no,
No,
this
it's a confusing
it is a little
question.
confusing. And yeah, that actually is good, right? We've talked about this before that if the examiner has to stop you, that's a good sign. It shows how fluent you are. You clearly have a lot to say.
Exactly, exactly. So, in part one, guys, you don't wait for the examiner to stop you. Like, this is what we tell our three keys IELTS students, guys. 3 to 5 sentences, finish. If you talk for a little bit too long, that's okay, right? Not every question, okay? But the examiner will be like, thank you, thank you, and then go on to the next question. And that'll happen in part three as well. But ideally, what we want to do is just give like a nice 3 to 5 sentence answer. Maybe sometimes, maybe for two answers, go on too long and be stopped by the examiner. And that's really our goal. Like that would be the perfect outcome to show fluency and control over your English and your ideas. But in part two, you have to keep talking until the examiner stops you. Okay. And these are everything that we're telling you right now. These are all rules that the examiner has to give you scores, right? It all has to do with your fluency score.
Yes, exactly. So we have another question, and this is what threw me off, right? So this one is from Nirmal Patel. Says, I just took IELTS today and I had a pause in part two, and the examiner asked me to explain more on the topic, and then I spoke a little more. But apart from this, my part one and part three was very good. Will I get a band score of 6? This is so tricky. We always have students ask us, what would my band score be? Without hearing your whole exam, unfortunately, we can't tell you what your score would be, but we can tell you, like Jessica was saying, what will decrease your scores. And if the examiner has to tell you to keep speaking, ask you for more, your fluency score is affected.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's impossible for us to know anything about your score. I mean, grammar, pronunciation, ideas, vocabulary, blinking words, we have no idea. And all of those things are part of your score. But as far as the part of fluency, because fluency is based on other things also, like idea repetition, right? Hesitation, repeated filler phrases. So fluency is still made up of a lot of factors. But in this case, the specific example in part two, you don't speak for long enough, and the examiner will say, because I want you to speak for 2 minutes. So my job is to try and make that happen. So if you stop at like a minute or whatever, even like a minute 40, I still have to try and get you to speak more. Then I have to say, like, can you say anything else about the topic? Which is like so stilted and formal, but that's what the examiner has to say to get you to keep talking. Now, if I have to say that, it's not necessarily a bad thing if you can keep going. You know what I mean? Like if you are like, oh, and then you keep talking, it might not have any effect. Again, assuming part one and part three are great.
Yeah, right, for sure. If you are able to easily continue the topic, add new details, like you said, you can't be just repeating the same thing you said before, but if you can add new information, expand on the story, that's true. There might not be any effect. You're not necessarily punished just because you stopped early. If you can continue, you potentially could still score 7 or higher.
Oh, definitely. I would say that stop would keep you from a 9, right? Because that's, it's not a perfect performance, but it won't stop you from getting a 7 for fluency for sure. So, okay, we're going to do a couple examples of performing poorly on the exam and what the examiner has to do because of that. So we're going to do 2 part 1 and 1 part 2. Man, there's a lot of confusing numbers. Okay, Aubrey, can you ask me first? You're going to be the examiner here.
Yes, perfect.
Okay? All right.
What do you like about your job?
It's flexible.
Can you share more about that?
So the examiner won't say that in part 1. The examiner is only allowed to ask why. So I'm glad you did that, Aubrey, because this is when it gets awkward for the examiner, is when why does not match what you said.
That's why I changed it. I'm like, wait, I can't say why. That doesn't make any sense.
That's why I'm so glad that happened, because like it is awkward sometimes as an examiner because we're not allowed to go off script. And so like if on that part 1 question on my examiner booklet, it has a question and then in parentheses there's a why. I'm only allowed to say that. I can't say anything else.
And that could really throw you off too.
Yeah.
If based on what you said, and then the examiner says why, and you're like, that doesn't make sense. Why doesn't make sense?
It completely does. I've done that on the test, and in my mind, I'm like, I'm so sorry to this student because this question doesn't make any sense, but like, I can't do anything about it. So let's try that one more time.
Okay, gotcha. All I can say is why. All right, I got it. Okay. What do you like about your job?
It's so fun.
Why?
Because I get to talk to a lot of amazing, motivated adults from around the world, and I get to be creative and utilize not only my life experience, but my expertise from my education. Ooh.
Nice. That was a little easier because you can share why it's fun.
Right?
Man, it's so tricky if they ask why and it's unrelated to your answer.
Let's actually do that. Let's see how I should answer an awkward one like that. So, okay, let's do this again, and we'll
Give
be
me
awkward.
an awkward one. Okay.
Okay.
How often do you read books in English?
How can I answer without why? How often do you read books in English? Books are great.
Why?
Why are books great, or why do I like books? I'm not sure what you mean by why, but I love reading. I have always loved reading. In fact, every night I still, at 42 years old, I read myself to sleep.
Nice. Man, it is so tricky. I hadn't really thought about this before. And I'm really glad we're covering this because I think it could really throw off students. It can throw off the examiner too, to where maybe they're giving you grumpy looks, like you said. Maybe they're saying, why annoyed? Because that's all they can say. And it doesn't make sense.
So funny. All right. So I think we're going to go to an example part 2 of what the examiner has to do if you stop talking. So we'll make it short, just like a student might do on the exam, and we'll see what happens here. So okay, I'll be the student again. I want to be the student again, and you'll still be the examiner.
Describe a time you had a problem while traveling.
I have traveled so much in my life, and I have had a lot of problems because my spatial awareness is horrible and I get lost all the time.
Can you share more about that?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry. Right. It's part 2. I have to speak for 2 minutes. Sorry about that. So I could talk about this one time I was in Venice and I got so lost. And I've actually read since that trip that no accurate map of the city exists. I don't know if that's true, but I did read that and I sort of believe it because the canals are nuts. It is so confusing to walk around there, especially as a foreigner. And I got lost constantly. In fact, the first day I checked into a hotel, I left immediately. I got lost on my way to whatever cathedral. I got lost again on my way back. I could not find my hotel for 3 hours. So anyways, guys, I won't continue that part 2 answer, but you could see how diving into that story would make it easy to fill that 2 minutes. So how did I handle that, Aubrey, and why would that be a good thing to do on the test?
Yeah, it was so natural the way you're like, oh yeah, part 2, I gotta speak for 2 minutes, right? It was very much the way a native would react if they had like made a mistake and it were pointed out. You know, you don't want to make it awkward. You don't want a long pause. Like, oh yeah, no problem. Oh, I could share. And that's such a fun phrase before sharing a story. Like, oh, I could share this. And then you dive right into an example of some time that this happened.
Yeah. Okay. I tried to think about the strategy to go along with that. So that was awesome. Okay, guys. So I hope this episode was really useful for you. If you are not following this podcast and you're going to take IELTS, or perhaps you just love the information we share, remember to hit follow right now wherever you're listening. And do check us out on IELTS Energy TV, guys, on YouTube. And don't forget about our free IELTS quiz, allearsenglish.com/myscore. All right. Super fun. Great insider takes today.
I know, right? Having not been an examiner like you were for 14 years, there are always these little things that are coming up because there's just so much to know.
So much.
So I'm glad we were able to share with students because that's weird. They can only ask you why in part 1. Good to know.
I know. IELTS is weird. That's the final takeaway. Okay. All right, Aubrey. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.
You too. See you next week.